Clemson's football season is right around the corner, and while there's a lot of talk about realignment, I've got Drew Schneider from Shakin the Southland, Hammering Rails, and Bring on the Cast, the Cats, to talk about Clemson's football season. Drew, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's nice to be talking to you, Ryan. We usually have to talk about basketball, so I'm a little excited to be talking about something a little more uplifting and optimistic.
That's right. For those who don't know, Drew is one of the fellow basketball writers on Shakin the Southland with me. So we're used to heartbreak. So hopefully we'll have something more optimistic to talk about here as we're focused on football. Drew, let's start talking about last season to kind of set the stage. So Clemson, 11-3, ACC champions, perfect in the ACC, but 0-3 against Power 5 non-conference opponents. Of course, they lost the rivalry game and lost the Orange Bowl. Kind of a weird season because things were looking pretty good for a while, and then started to see the cracks all of a sudden, and then it ended with a quarterback change. Weird year. Where do you put it?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a tale of two half seasons, right? So, I mean, Clemson comes out, puts up 41 on Georgia Tech, 35 on Foreman. Wait, hold on. Is this right? Yeah, this is what I'm looking at. And are putting up big numbers, but DJ falls apart midway through the season. I think the Syracuse game, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah, it had to be Syracuse. It's so weird because against Wake Forest, after that game, I thought he's figured it out. He's the 5-star. I'm so happy for him.
Yeah, no, I was definitely on that bandwagon where I was like, there it is. That's the 5-star, stud that's going to be in the NFL in a year.
Yeah,
he just outdueled Sam Hartman and those big Wake receivers. It looked like everything was working, and then everything fell apart.
Yeah, I definitely kind of end the season feeling like certainly a partial success. I'm not going to be upset about an ACC championship season, but also it made the ACC look really, really weak, that the ACC champion lost to every halfway decent non-conference team they faced. So a little bit of mixed bags, but the offseason, I think, was really successful. They didn't take any transfers like I was hoping, but a new offensive coordinator, strong recruiting class. I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited about the year that we're about to talk about. All right, so last thing to close the book on last season. So in 2021, Tony Elliott is running the offense. DJ's his first year as a starter. They ranked 82nd in total offense, only 361 yards per game. They replace DJ's back, but Elliott goes to Virginia. I think a lot of people are probably happy about that. And Brandon Streeter becomes the OC. And they improved a lot, especially early in the season, but they improved a lot, 410 yards per game. So that's 49 yards per game more. So pretty darn good. But still only 48th nationally. How do we feel about that, and how much should we kind of demand or expect them to get better?
I have mixed emotions about Brandon Streeter and his tenure at Clemson because, I mean, you did see improvement last year, and when the quarterback was working, the offense looked fine. And just that one position, once that short-circuited in the Syracuse game, just everything went straight down the tubes. And so, how much of that is that on the offensive coordinator because the quarterback starts just throwing the ball in the dirt? But at the same time, it was time. It was stale. I think everybody the general consensus was that Clemson needed to move on because even though they were putting up points, and it always felt like a struggle, it never really, the offense came in fits and starts where you'd have, a touchdown and then 2 3-and-outs, and then maybe a field goal and then a turnover. So we were putting points on the board and moving the ball, but it always felt sort of disjointed. And so I think Dabo was right to pull the trigger on that one.
So let's take a look here at some numbers. So this is how they stacked up last year. And in comes Garrett Riley from TCU. And here's sort of the difference, right? And the one thing that's not shown on here is plays of 50-plus yards. TCU is number 1 in the country. Clemson was in the 70th. They were like 72nd or so. They did not hit very many explosive plays. But you see the yards per game, you see the yards per play, huge difference there. And it's, on the ground and in the air. You saw it firsthand because I know you write for the Kansas State side as well. Maybe just let's start big picture. What are some of the biggest differences we're going to see in this offense?
Well, it's weird because Riley comes from more like an air raid background, but the 2022 TCU team was a run heavy offense. Keandre Miller and Max Duggan, each Miller had 224 carries, Duggan had 137 carries, and then their third back, DeMarcado, had 21 carries. So they had 121 carries. So you had, 3 backs get, and I'm counting Max Duggan almost as an extra running back for them.
Yeah. Well, DeMarcado and Miller combined for 2,080 yards. That's incredible for a duo.
Right. That's a lot of handoffs too. I mean, that's Riley really pushing the run, and so it was run heavy and then play action deep to big receivers on the outside like Quentin Johnson, who's with San Diego now. They run, just pound Keandre Miller, run Max Duggan, and then pull it and have one of their big wide receivers on the outside one-on-one with a corner once the safety starts coming up to stop the run. So it's really a traditional sort of themed offense, or at least it was last year. It looks different than what you would think out of like a pro offset offense, but it was establish the run, pull the safeties up, hit them deep. And that's.
Yeah. And one thing I heard, and it's not necessarily specific to him, but in just the way college offenses, kind of the modern college offense runs versus the NFL is, the term they used was shot play. I think this might have been Bud Elliott where I picked this up, but some plays, everyone is doing something to get one guy open, and that's the shot. And it might not work, but if it does, it's 50 yards. Whereas I felt like Clemson's offense was, here's option 1 for 12 yards, here's option 2 for 8 yards, and here's option 3 for 6 yards. And this quarterback still has to make the right decision, which he might not do anyway, and the offensive line can't blow it, and the receiver can't drop it, and that's just to get 12 yards. And then you got to execute that, 3 out of 4 times, down the field, right? So I think you'll see not necessarily moving the chains, third down percentage get better. I think you just see less plays per drive because they're either going to either have to give up and punt, or they're going to hit big. I think it's going to make it a lot more fun.
Yeah, no, that TCU offense was explosive. They were tough. Kansas State had a really good defense with a couple top-notch corners, and they gashed them, especially in that first game. There wasn't a lot they could do. Of course, Kansas State came back and got them in the Big 12 championship game. But, I mean, that game was 28-31. The first Kansas State game was, 38-28 win for TCU. And that was, Josh Brents was one of the top draft picks, corners off the board. He was out there with Johnson. Johnson was terrorizing him. So that's, what he can bring.
All right. So let's, we'll break this into a couple of videos, but I want to kind of wrap this on. We're talking about running the ball so much. I love Thomas Austin called it the dirt raid offense, and sort of in that vein, posted a poll up on Twitter, over under 2,000 combined rushing yards for Will Shipley and Phil Mafah. I was really surprised. This was the one that people were the most in on. I don't know if they realized quite how tough it is to get that many yards, but let me post this up. 2,000 combined rushing yards, 81.5% of voters, who are mostly Clemson fans, say yes, they'll combine for over 2,000. What say you, Drew?
Yeah, I think they'll get there. I think they will. I think they're going to need to run the ball, especially early in the year. I think the offensive line is going to be a strength, and I think they're going to want to establish the run this year. I mean, you've got 2 top-level backs and a quarterback who can run the ball as well. So that's a perfect it's really a perfect combination for what we were talking about of the Riley offense. Pound the ball, get a couple backs, up around 2,000 yards, and then get chunk plays in the air. So it's set up well for Clemson. I can see why Riley was interested in the job because it has a lot of the components he had at TCU.
Yeah, definitely. And I was pondering this. Chad Morris coming over just as analyst could only help. I love the move, but I wonder if he sits back, learns, reacclimates himself. Garrett Riley takes a huge job in 3 years, and there's Chad Morris, maybe a co-OC or something in the future. But anyway, to this question, I'm actually going to go the other way. I'll let you be the optimist. I'm feeling like this is 2,000 yards is really hard. Kendre Miller had 1,399. Amari DeMarcado had 681. That's for TCU last year. And they finished with just barely over 2,000 and 2,080. It's just a lot. And I think kind of to your point, actually, I think Cade Klubnik is going to take a lot of those yards. Max Duggan had 423. Was encouraged to hear that Cade is over 200 pounds. Coach just kind of admitted he was a little too skinny last year to really be full starter all year and take that pounding. I think now he's supposed to be, I think they said over 205 by the season opener. So I think they run him a lot. I think he eats up some of those yards. And you can see here the 2018 team, which is the best Clemson team ever, and 2019, which had both of them had Travis Etienne. His ability to just break off the big plays, the difference between him and Keandre Miller, those guys getting like 7 yards of carry over Shipley, who's very steady, reliable, good player, but he's getting a lot less than that. He's getting 5 and change. Maybe he gets 6 this year, but I think a little under 2,000. Maybe Shipley. I see him getting used. They said Garrett Riley said they're going to use him in a lot of creative ways, a lot of different ways. So I see him catching more passes, getting more total yards, perhaps maybe around 1,000, 1,100 yards, and then Mafah jumps from 515 to maybe 700, 800, and they're just a little short of 2,000. But I think that the ground game's the strength of the offense is really strong.
Yeah, it's always interesting with Shipley because you kind of think of him as a fast guy, as like a fast back, but he's always getting run down. Like always, if he just had like an extra gear, he'd probably have another like 5 or 6 touchdowns on his career where people just track him down.
Yeah. I don't know that him or Mafah are speedsters, and that's why I hesitate around hitting such a huge number. If he could just be just half a step faster, there's a lot of big plays he could break. And guys do get faster. I mean, that is part of strength and conditioning, and that works. So maybe that happens this year, and he goes from very good to, an elite running back that gets taken, probably not first round because NFL hates running backs, but, 3rd round or something like that. So that's definitely something to hope for. Drew, let's pick this up in another video, and we'll talk the passing game. Thanks for being on.
Thanks.